Hi, my name is Mark Bealin. I'm happy to be back at State of Search. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, local SEO strategies. Talk a little bit about hacks too. I want to give you a framework for a long-term sustainable local SEO strategy. Well, the presentation is about local SEO and I'm a local SEO. I think a lot of the tips and tricks will help traditional SEOs and anybody working a strategic role. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am the founder and principal of Search Lab. We're a boutique agency in local SEO and paid media. I have a video series that comes out every Thursday called Suds in Search, where I interview the top digital marketers in the world about their area of expertise. I would appreciate it if you check it out. My agency also has a video series on Tuesdays about local SEO called Local Search Tuesdays with Greg Gifford. Anytime I'm in Texas talking, I like to remind people that I was a football coach. I know of the football-loving tradition in Texas, and this is me. I was a football coach from a couple of years ago, and I want to talk about hacks a little bit today and how to build a strategy. And I think there's a good story from my coaching career that might bridge into local SEO strategy. So on this field, we are at the field of our most hated rival, St. Lawrence. In 2016, we were about to play them in the championship game. So this was for all the marbles. Towards the end of the night, my co-defensive coordinator found what I would call a hack. He figured out that where the running back was in relation to the quarterback would tell us whether or not the offense was running the ball or passing the ball on the play. And if they were running the ball, we would know pretty confidently what kind of run it would be. This seemed to me to be, everything we needed. We had the hack, we had the cheat code. We were going to beat this team because of this little thing we found. I went into that game so confident, and we were so excited about this strategy and how we were this little hack, I should say, not strategy, this hack, and how we were going to use it and get over on these guys. Well, as Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, and that's exactly what happened in this game. So instead of us being able to use this hack that I like so much, our young quarterback fumbled the ball many times, to do different things throughout the course of the game to try and get an advantage. And long story short, the hack that I was so proud of didn't play into it. It really wasn't important to the outcome of the game. I'm happy to say that we did win, and we won. And here's proof positive. There I am with the team, but it wasn't a hack that did it. As much as we were proud of this and it was a very cool thing, really what saved the day was we had a great process. You can see it over here. This is a crude process to be sure, but it's a process. And it was a strategy. And it was because of what we did for the entire offseason and for 8 weeks into the season that we got through that tough championship game. And so I think it's interesting. You can have this hack. You can have a hack just like you do in SEO and think, man, I'm going to beat everybody. But really, it's the team with a better process that's usually going to win. The team that has better strategy usually wins. And frankly, I think this is more about the job than anything else. So let me stop and say, I'm going to be talking about SEO strategy, and it helps to define some things. So what do I mean when I say SEO strategy? Well, there are a few main points. The first is I like to contrast strategies with tactics. Strategies are long-term with an ambiguous endpoint. It means you can do this for forever if you want. I've met a lot of people in the audience who have clients they've had for a very long time. I have clients that I've had since 2009. So, and their numbers just keep getting better and better. So there's nothing about SEO that has a definitive endpoint. You can keep lathering, rinsing, and repeating and doing better and getting better results time and time again. Contrast that with tactics. Tactics have a specific beginning and endpoint. You may even have a time estimate for how long they're supposed to be done. You probably check to make sure you're hitting it close to that time estimate. The other thing about a strategy is it's comprised of timelines, inputs, metrics, and KPIs, the good stuff that marketers love. I love to put task management tool into presentations, not because I love task management tools or anything like that. I like to think about it, the mind that came up with how to do what and when and who should do it. Why would that help drive to some KPI that we're looking toward? That mind is what I'm really talking about today. So we're talking about all this sort of thing that is really the good stuff of being a marketer. I think doing tactical work is more about having a sequence of to-dos that you must complete in order. This is more about you could be creative here. Mostly, I think that being strategic is about making decisions. So you need to make decisions about which tactics to utilize, and I think just as importantly, which not to. So you do have a finite amount of time. In some cases, clients need a lot of content, and others, they need a lot of link building, and others, they need more review management. And you're going to have to make hard decisions about what to do and what to cut in lieu of something more pragmatic for the client. I think there's some pitfalls of not thinking strategically, of thinking tactically, of thinking about just trying to do a few different tactics over and over again. One of the main ones for me is that workflows become untenable. It just sounds like an awful job to come in and try and reinvent the position, the objectives every day. Try and just get everything out of one little hack that you have. I think if you think strategically, the workflows are much more harmonious. You have a long-term vision, and these things need to be accomplished in order for us to have a chance at our goal. The other thing that I think is important about strategy is that you're tethered to something. So when you have a strategy, you've got kind of a North Star to shoot for. If you're in an agency, or if you worked on campaigns and you just feel like you're constantly pivoting, every couple of weeks you've got a new tactic you're trying, and there's no sort of long, like I'm talking months of a vision and a map, I think that you're probably missing on strategy. So be mindful. If you're in a position where you feel like, oh, we're constantly coming up with a new process, we're pivoting, very likely you have to have a long session on the whiteboard and come up with a better strategy. I think the next thing that is really important to me is to rely on hacks. So this is a big part of my talk. I started out with it, and I think for those of us in local SEO, there may be some heads nodding because we see hacks all the time, but it helps for me to define this as well. So a hack is not the same thing as spam to me. I think there are different motives. It's very often not, intentionally violating some guideline from Google. It's more often like you're relying on something that is not sustainable. And so I'll give you some examples from local SEO, but really what it does is it gives you maybe a short-term boost where the outside looks like the left side of this apple, and really long-term, you're going to have a rotten interior because you have nothing sustainable. So in local SEO, there's an example. Google has a real sensitivity to relevancy signals. And really what that means is that if you put a keyword or the city name in the field where your business name goes, Google tends to reward that. So I walked by, this locksmith is right down the street from my office. I actually walked by to make sure none of their signage said Chicago. But if you look, they've added this word Chicago in there. That's not because it's the name of the business. They've done that because they think it will help them rank for locksmith Chicago or security doors Chicago. And so it's a little bit of a hack. There are some really hilarious examples of this where it gets really egregious. Here's one from a competitor of one of our clients where they've just put a million keywords, a bunch of the same town a handful of times, and the business name just looks totally ridiculous. Again, the hack here is that you're taking advantage of this sensitivity for relevancy from Google, and that you will, hopefully appear better if you're this Kelly Construction for terms like home repair or residential builder in Crown Point. Unfortunately, even if Google doesn't handle these as well as you might like, really great SEOs like my friends Jason Brown and Ben Fisher, and for that matter myself, are going around and trying to take these down. So even if Google's not getting you, consumer vigilantes in the local SEO community will probably edit that. And to the extent that you're benefiting from it much right now, it won't be a long-term thing because sooner or later, you're going to have your business. Another example of a local SEO hack are what I would call crappy city pages. Before I go any further, I need to say I have no problem with city pages. In fact, I think city pages are great. As an example, I recently moved from the city of Chicago to a nearby suburb called Glenview. And when you move, you hire a lot of contractors, you need a lot of stuff done at your house. And so it's very helpful to me when I'm searching to know, okay, you're a contractor located in Chicago. Do you actually work in Glenview? Do you have examples of your work? Are you really involved, or is it just something that token you put on your website? A really good town page would have, pictures of a project you've done. They may have a testimonial from a happy customer. If they really want to go the extra mile, they'd have a video testimonial from a happy customer. They get involved in the local community and sponsor a little league or become a member of the Chamber of Commerce. You'd have sort of these like trust badges on your city page. You'd have totally unique content from any other city page on your site. But a lot of these local SEOs, these hacky examples, they'll do this. They'll have a page that's got Genoa, Illinois on one, and then they'll have Lincolnwood, and the content is exactly the same. All the headings are the same. All I did was find Genoa and replace it with Lincolnwood. I like to not give these kind of hacky examples. Like I like to give them the best sort of motives, assume the best motives. I think they probably thought this would help. Maybe they even saw it from a competitor and they wanted to mimic it. I don't think this is spam necessarily. I don't think this is somebody who's trying to act in direct violation of Google's guidelines. I like to think that they just don't know, and they don't know to have a strategy to really do that sort of work. Because think about all that stuff I talked about on a positive town page. You're going to need a writer, an editor, perhaps somebody to do video production. You're going to need to find a happy customer in that town who's okay with you taking pictures and putting a testimonial up. You're actually going to have to do the hard work of becoming part of that community. And to do that at scale is very hard. So the reason for this hacking is like, there's a lot of suburbs. You want to get your name out there to all of them. A strategy allows you to be intentional, allows you to be slow, but really focused on making good town pages that will help you rank. My other favorite local SEO hack is, it has to do with reviews. There's actually quite a few in reviews, but this is one of my favorites. So this is Ross Chiropractic. The doctor's last name is Ross. He has 16 reviews. As you go through the reviews, you'll see that a lot of people from the Ross family have reviewed this chiropractic facility. Eric Ross, Diane, I wish her name was Diana Ross. Diane Ross has also reviewed. What you're seeing is just that they're getting their family or their friends to review them in hopes that they will have more reviews or more positive reviews than their competition. And it's certainly understandable why they want to do this. Reviews are so important. It's a big prominence signal, and it's a great way for you to show potential customers that you really do a great job. There's a problem with this. You're going to run out of friends and family. It's not a repeatable process. So instead of Ross Chiropractic doing this, I would recommend they talk to my friends at GatherUp. Great tool that you can send out a text message and an email to all your previous patients and make sure that they leave your reviews. You can kind of learn from those reviews you get back, which is great. You probably should train your people, your front desk people and the chiropractors who work at your practice, actually asking for the review. That's one of the best ways to do it. And then another way you could do is just make simple marketing collateral. Have a placard on your front desk, hand out leave behinds. You even use a QR code, so it's really easy for them to ask for a review. But that involves a strategy. It involves like actually really putting in the work. And these hacks, I think, will always lose to a long-term sustainable strategy. Okay, so I've talked about some hacks. I've talked about why you need to have a long-term strategy. What are some recommendations I have? Well, I'm going to start with some big picture things first, and then we'll get really into details in just a moment. So my first recommendation is that one person has to own the strategy. So if more than one person is accountable, nobody's accountable. That's something we say here at Search Lab. Here, the individual consultants will own the strategy for their clients. So we have, as our Vice President of Search, Greg Gifford, one of the most famous SEOs in the world. He owns strategy for not one client. He trains and manages SEO consultants, empowers them, gives them confidence that they can do this themselves, and they own the strategy for each of their clients. And that way, we know how to kind of assess how our people are doing. They are empowered. They feel like they really have accountability in this. And I think that's important. If you're at an agency or if you're doing work with somebody and nobody really owns strategy, you say like, who is in charge of the long-term strategic vision of this? And you can't answer that quickly. I think it's time again for a whiteboard session with your team. I have another recommendation, which is, over time, strategies need to be evaluated and adjusted. So how are you going to do this? You can't keep going forever. Even though I'm a big fan of strategy over tactics, you still need to have some sort of adjustment over time. And so I'll tell you how we do it at SearchLive. We're intentional. We have in our link building campaigns, we adjust and evaluate every quarter. So every 3 months, that whole strategy is looked at, what worked, what didn't work, how was our prospecting, how was our outreach, and we make decisions about what to keep, what to take out, where to go next, and how to return that information back to the client. Our content strategy is adjusted every 6 months. Now, before I go further, there are some cases where we would just stop a strategy altogether. If there's some important KPI that's dropping, or we see something that's sort of peculiar, we will stop and kind of call a 911 drill. But in general, those are edge cases. For your garden variety client, we're going to adjust content every 6 months. We're going to watch and make sure that that's performing as it does, just because I think content's a longer term play. For our client cadence, we're going to want to check in with our clients every month at a minimum, because we think it's really important to have clients aligned with strategy. So I think, was it important that we have link building check-in every 3 months instead of every 4 months? No, we could probably make it every 4 months. It would be not the biggest deal in the world. The point is that we were intentional. We say, we're going to check on this. We're going to have a meeting and edit and evaluate how things are performing and adjust where necessary. The last thing, I think that you want to be careful of packaged SEO services versus customized SEO. I'm a really big fan of what we do in terms of customizing the campaign for each individual client. I think that each client has different things that they need. Again, some clients need reviews, some clients need content, some clients need links. And if you are pigeonholed to a package, I don't think that's going to go very well. We certainly start out with a skeleton frame, the local SEO campaign, but very seldom is that exactly what the client gets. There's always going to be some adjustments. And so, for example, we customize reports for each client. We use Data Studio to do it. This is a picture of one of our clients back from August. And each of these reports is customized. So each client gets one that's specifically for them. If they're, if it's really important to them to have traffic that goes from the center, it's really important for them to have phone call conversions or lead form conversions, we'll adjust and adapt our report for their specific needs. I think it's really important, especially in terms of reporting, that you're listening to the client, you know what they need, or you know what they're going to really care about, and you customize your report for it. I mentioned it just a moment ago, but to really customize a local SEO strategy, I think the client is key. I was really lucky to be on SEO Chat a couple of weeks ago. If you're not familiar with SEO Chat, it's basically you go on Twitter, you follow the hashtag SEO Chat on Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern. And the presenter, in this case it was me, will ask a series of questions for 10 minutes that will respond to answers from the people following the hashtag. And then after 10 minutes, I'll give my response, and we'll do that 6 times. After an hour, we've had a good chat. And one of the questions I asked was, what role does the client have in coming up with an SEO strategy? Now, of all the questions I asked, this one got the most energy, the most excitement. People were really clamoring to talk about what role the client plays in all of this. And I think this is huge. And as a point of example, I want to go a little bit deeper. So we're talking about some surface level stuff. I think link building is so important in local SEO. It's different than traditional SEO too. A handful of links a quarter can be a windfall for us. But if you're in a competitive niche, like being a personal injury attorney, generally everybody's pretty good at relevancy stuff. They've got their GMB optimized. They've got the table stakes stuff taken care of, and links become the differentiator. So I want to talk to you about how I actually use this. The client is the key in our local link building strategy. So when I think about local link building, I think it's got to be strategic. It can't be just like all we do is sponsor stuff. You have to try a little bit different tactics. Generally speaking, the easier the link is to get, as a rule of thumb, the less impact it's going to have. So I start out with just sort of a basic idea of a workflow. I think most of the stuff, if you've been in SEO for a couple of 3 years, you know how to do link prospecting, you know how to do outreach. Generally speaking, you know how to measure in some way. But the last parts, I think, are what get overlooked all the time. And in local, this is really important because the client is going to be the person who gives you the ammo. So you need to come with that to them with ideas. You need to build rapport, but they're the ones who are ultimately going to give you the ideas and tell you what they're doing in their community. So I say the first step is client communication. Here's what happens. When you start with SearchLab, you'll get a local link building questionnaire that looks just like this. We'll ask you a bunch of questions, and it helps us just get the ball rolling on our prospecting. This is the beginning of client communication. It is by no means the end. We're going to start with this. I like to point out to people all the time, like even our own team, I'll say, okay, if you asked me about SearchLab 1 year ago, let's say I filled this out over a course of a year, the business changes dramatically. My interest in my charitable giving changes dramatically in 1 year. What I'm into, what I do. I'm not coaching football anymore. I'm really into anti-animal cruelty stuff now. You know, all of those things need to be refreshed over time. So this gets you started, but is by no means the end of it. So based on this client communication, you're able to do better prospecting. And you know, one of the things I've noticed, if you want to make a popular blog post, if you want to make a popular presentation, say something like 25 easy link building tips for local SEO. People are clamoring for easy stuff. And I hate to tell you, prospecting is just never fun. It's hard. You got to stick with it, and you got to eat your vegetables. So, you know, I've used eat your vegetables. It's a trip to the dentist. This is the part that's hard, but if you do it right, you're set up. And so there's a quote from Thomas Edison. You know, a lot of this stuff is you're missing it because it's hard. And, you know, Thomas Edison said opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. Prospecting is the hard work to me. So you've got an idea from the client. You need to go and find all the opportunities you possibly can. You need to document them, turn to the client, make sure that they're aligned with the company's vision. And doing that work makes the next step, which is outreach, much, much more easy. My biggest tip on local outreach is, and this is a newer thing for us and we're having great results, try not to cold email. Everybody's cold emailing. Don't use LinkedIn. I think everybody who's on LinkedIn has probably had enough of getting pitched on there for either link building or some other sort of solicitation. What we're really having success with is actually picking up the phone, calling whatever that is, a local charity. In one case, we called the local government, and we're able to get through and get a link from the municipal government for one of our clients. This is all from using the phone. And you're able to do so much more in terms of your pitch when you're on the phone with people. So I would say cold email, it's still important. It still has its place. But if you want my tip, my latest tip, use the phone for outreach. It works great. The other thing I mentioned in part of my process is that you should measure everything. Well, you can't measure anything if you're not documenting everything. So I am a little bit of a pain where we have anything, I always want it written down. I want it easy for people to find, and good paper makes good friends. So this is going to be a gift for you for 6 months from now. If you keep very close track of all your prospects, how you contacted them, how it's going, are you moving them through sort of a sales funnel, really? But documenting everything is so essential. The other reason for documenting is you might get promoted, and now you've got documentation that will help the person who's taking over for you. You may have to go on maternity or paternity leave. If you've got no documentation, how is this person who's filling in for you going to be successful? They're going to have to start over. So documenting everything helps us measure more effectively. It helps us be a more cohesive team, and it will be a big gift for you, as you move along, as you get months into a local link building campaign. My last thing is your job, I think, more than anything, is to generate ideas. So the client is it's very likely that the client is involved in their community in some way or would like to be involved in their community in some way. I have yet to get on a call where I ask a client about their activities in their local community, and they just go, I hate the place. I don't do anything. Usually they're involved. They're sponsoring a little league. They're involved in their church. They're involved in the PTA. They're involved in the, outreach to animal cruelty, like I am. What I would say is you need to really listen and do the kind of work that consultants are hired for, which is to humbly listen to the person who's paying you. Use that information to come up with ideas for how you could go about getting link building ideas. So one of my favorites is from a presenter at this conference, Blake Denman, who I'd love to give him credit for this because it was one of my favorites, is very likely your local client is going to have vendors. They're going to have an accountant. They're going to have a lawyer. They're going to have a bookkeeper. They're going to have an IT support company. You need to come up with the idea of saying, hey, client, why don't we reach out to the IT company and I'll leave a review on your behalf. It'll look like a testimonial from you to this IT company. Why would they say no? Of course, they're going to say yes to that. It will link back to your website. You'll have a strong local link. And you can do this for 8 or 9 vendors. So you have your meeting with a client, you begin your prospecting, you find all their different vendors, you think of ideas you hadn't thought of in that meeting, you prospect away, you find as many opportunities as you can, you outreach to all these people, hopefully over the phone, and you set up a bunch of this testimonial work where now your client is leaving testimonials on their vendor sites that are real reviews. They're really happy to work with this vendor, and each of those testimonials links back to the client. That's a great month's work of local link building, and it's easy. But you, as the SEO, have to bring that idea to the forefront. So if you're working with, if we work with plumbers and HVAC, tough, like not a super sexy business, you need to do a little bit of sales work and convince them they need to give a mass giveaway and have an event. Right? So we did that. It's a true story, and we got links from that. I think your job is really to know what are the key ways to build links, bring those to the client provides you information, you prospect, you outreach, you measure, and then you come back with the next idea. And that's the workflow to me. So always return to the client, be mindful of why they're paying you, get on the same page with them. And if they're on board, you can start to have real momentum in your campaigns. That's the goal of any sort of process, I believe. So I encourage you guys, focus on strategies that are long-term that you can lather, rinse, and repeat. Make sure you document everything. Make sure you're putting the client first involved in your strategy. Make sure that there's one person who owns the strategy and there is one throat to choke if anything goes wrong, by the way. Ultimately, I love talking about this. If you'd like to connect with me, I'm on Twitter. My handle is Bealin, and this is my company's website, Search Lab Digital, where you can find, our blog is updated constantly. We create a lot of content, and I'd love to talk to any of you about strategy. I'll stick around for questions. I appreciate you coming to my session. Thanks again for State of Search for having me, and I look forward to hearing from you guys.